Hey, Matt from StrongerYou here, and today I'm going to be sharing with you a strategy that I like to use with a lot of the lifters that I'll work with when they're getting ready for their first powerlifting competition. Now, the benefit that we get from this is we can see increases of up to as high as 10% on their total. So think about going from a 910 pound to a 1,000 pound total, for example, at your first meet. And the changes that we make actually involve nothing to do with programming and have everything to do with competition day strategy. So I'm going to share with you the exact strategy that we use, and I've got a little resource at the end on how you can very simply use this strategy on your own just by entering your maxes. Now, you may have tested your maxes before running some kind of a peaking program to figure out what your 1 rep max is, but you might have found that your numbers in training gave you estimated maxes that were a lot higher than what you had actually lifted. And one of the reasons this can be is the actual spacing of your attempts. Now, in a powerlifting meet, the way the day is structured, in a 3-lift competition, you're gonna have in a single flight meet, so all the lifters lift as one group, and everyone's gonna go do their first squats in what's called a rising bar. So the lifter with the least amount of weight for their squat opener or their first squat will go first, and then everybody does their seconds, which is generally a little heavier, and then everyone will do their thirds. And then in a multi-flight meet where there's 2 or even 3 groups of lifters, flight B would go do their first squat, their second squat, their third squat, same with flight C. There's typically a short intermission, and then you'll see the meet move on into the bench portion where everybody goes with that same rising bar, lightest bench to start. Everyone does their first bench, everyone does their second bench, everyone does their third bench, and so on, short break and on to the deadlift. Now, in these multi-flight meets where you have more than one group of lifters going in a competition day, you can actually use the fact that you might be in flight A or flight B to your advantage when you're timing out your warm-ups, and we'll touch on that more a little bit later. But right now, let's talk first about the actual attempt structure you want to use to increase your maximum potential weight lifted for the day, which is how you can increase your total, which is the main metric we're looking at for how to be competitive in powerlifting and even how lifters win powerlifting meets and take first in their class or best overall. And so when we're talking strategic attempt selection, really the main thing we have to consider is that our goal is to increase the total amount of weight lifted for the day. We want to conserve our energy across all 3 lifts, and that's going to mean being tactical about how much you push on your squat or how much you push on your bench in order to conserve enough energy for your deadlift, but not sandbagging so much that you actually have a negative impact on your total. A common saying that we'll see with the squat is, for every 5 kilos extra you push on your squat, we might see you actually take 5, 7, or even 10 kilos off your max deadlift in a competition day. And so there's definitely, while that's not a universal rule, it is a balancing act, especially with the squat and deadlift, with how hard you push one compared to how much room you leave for the deadlift later in the day. And there's definitely nothing that's going to make up for just simply experience, but we'll talk about how to anchor your performances in the squat and your expectations for the deadlift together. So what I want to do is I'm actually going to take you through the powerlifting meet attempt selection tool that I use with all of the lifters that I coach. And you can actually access this for free through the link in the description. But let's jump in and we're going to get right into the actual tool. So using the actual powerlifting attempt tool is very easy to get that boost on your PRs. Now, first thing you're going to want to do is just simply make a copy of this tool. But from here, there's a free training actually on how to prepare for your first powerlifting meet. It's like a 45-minute webinar. It's going to walk you through the exact steps you need. But from there, you can enter your lifter stats and you're going to go into your lift. Now let's talk specifically about actually preparing for each lift and the attempt structure behind things. So the goal here is it's really important to have a plan for your attempts. Our goal with our day should be to maximize our total, and in order to do that, we need to strategically build to the heaviest possible third attempt. And so what we want to do is typically have our third attempt be our target for the day. You should have some numbers in mind of the heaviest that you want to go, and then you can create some small deviations from there, 1 or 2% off. That will give you, hey, if I'm having an amazing day, I'll go a little higher. And if I'm having a so-so day, maybe not as great as it was, as I was hoping for, go a little lighter. And then we work backwards from there. So let's say you squat 440, okay? Now, I'm a big fan of having your third attempt be that PR match. And especially for your first meet, the goal should be to get some numbers. You're probably gonna come close to what your PRs are, And if you can break them easily, fantastic, but go in really with the expectation of getting used to your first meet day. And so that's typically gonna put your third in that 98 to 102% of your max. Gives you some wiggle room depending how the day is going. Now from there, we have a little bit less. And I like to actually split the difference from where I'd open, which our rule of thumb is about 90 to 92%, maybe a little lighter if you're very nervous, but the goal is having a weight that you should be able to triple on a so-so day. And so in this scenario, we've got about a 400-pound squat, right? Split the difference because we want to take some fairly even jumps, and that's going to mean I'm taking about a 420-pound second attempt to build up to my 440 projected third. Now, in order to build properly, you can see if we started to space things too close together, can you imagine doing like 420, then 430, and then 440? You'd probably be a little bit more fatigued by the time you got to 440, and having done a couple of reps within 5% of that weight, you're gonna come in a little bit more fatigued. And so starting at about 90, give or take, % of your target third is really the best way to bring your strongest numbers to your third attempt and bring the biggest total possible. Now, with the bench, I typically like to go fairly similar in terms of an attempt structure here. We don't really have to worry about conserving things all that much. Now, with the bench, you can tend to push a little harder, and typically I advise lifters, if that second feels really good, push a little more on the aggressive side with the bench because it's going to have a fairly minimal impact on your third deadlift. You're just not going to have as much overall fatigue. Your back, your legs aren't as impacted compared to a squat. And with the deadlift, I like to actually space things out further and starting a couple % lighter. So typically in that 88 to 90% instead of that 90 to 92% zone is just going to allow you to take some slightly larger jumps with the deadlift and space things out a little further. Now that couple % might not seem like anything significant, but it's the end of the day. You've done 6 heavy lifts plus your warm-ups at this point by the time you've gotten to deadlifts. And so starting a little lighter and taking a bigger jump to the next one, the deadlift as a lift can typically tolerate this more easily. I've actually got a lifter where we'll take 10 to 15% jumps attempt over attempt for him because that's how he performs best. Pros and cons of that kind of approach. But taking some larger jumps on the deadlift and deliberately sandbagging the start of your deadlifts is really the secret sauce with having a solid game day plan and building that third deadlift to take the total that you're looking for. Now, the last thing we haven't talked about is actually strategically approaching your warm-ups. One of the most common problems that I see at open meets when lifters are getting ready for that first competition is they'll show up and they have no idea what they're doing for warm-up weights and they have no idea when they should be doing them, and you end up with kind of 2 people. First person warms up too early, is like ants in their pants, they hate sitting around, and then they've got like 20 minutes until they go on the platform, right? And then they're cold and then they're not warmed up anymore by the time they get to that first lift. You can see how this might be a bit of a problem, right? So what I like to do is with this tool, you can literally just put, when is my flight supposed to start? So if lifting starts at 9 a.m. and you're flight A, there you go. And what number are you in the flight? On average, each lifter is going to be about 60 seconds in the flight, give or take 15 seconds either way. So 45 to 75 seconds. But on average, 1 attempt per minute is pretty standard with a well-run powerlifting meet. So if you got 12 lifters in the flight and you're the 6th, you can expect that you're probably going to go on around 9:06. Now, you can see that these are calculated out, and you typically want to have your last warm-up happen, and it should be 90 to 95% of what your opener is. And that should happen somewhere in the realm of about 7 to 12 minutes before your opener. That's going to give you enough time to fully recover at a neural level as well as physical, and really have the best odds possible of having your first attempt go well. Ultimately, your first attempt is really just your last warm-up in the day, and this is going to line things up really well for you, right? From there, you can see all the times are automatically calculated. Now, doing things chronologically like this works really well when you're flight A and you know, hey, the flight starts at this time and from there, I'm the 6th person. Simple enough. But what if you're flight B? What if there's a bunch of lifters going before you and they're all doing their first and their second and their third squats and you're simply in flight B and you're like, I don't know how long it's going to be until my flight even starts. So you can estimate things based on this, and you could simply put, okay, well, there's 12 lifters in the flight before me. I'm the 6th lifter in the next flight. And so in reality, there would actually be 36 attempts that happen in a 12 lifter flight before you, and then you're 6th, which would mean that you are 42nd, right? So that is one way to estimate, roughly speaking, where you should be. But there's actually a better way. And so most powerlifting meets will have some kind of a scoreboard where you can watch the attempts as they go through. And basically each of these columns will populate where as the lifters go through their first squats, second squats, third squats, it'll tell you where they're at in the flight. And so if you're flight B, what you can do is, knowing that each attempt takes about a minute, you can start to anchor your warm-ups against the timing of the lifters in the flight before you. So if you're 6th in the flight and you want 10 minutes between your last warm-up and your first attempt, and you're averaging about a minute, well, you just go back 4 lifters. And so more or less the bottom of flight 3 is where you'd want to be taking your last warm-up. From there, that means if you go up another 10 or so lifters, right? Probably want to take your second to last warm-up around the start of thirds or around the end of seconds. And then you can work backwards from there with however many increments and timing and all these kinds of things. But as a rough rule, averaging out 10-ish minutes from your last warm-up to your first attempt, 5-ish minutes between your second to last warm-up and your last warm-up, and the rest of it, you should be able to just go through and do the reps by and large, space them out fairly evenly. Every 2 to 5 minutes, go for a set, basically. The goal is not to be super efficient. The goal is to be accurate and line things up where your last warm-up is lined up at an appropriate time junction to when you're going to go onto the platform. And if you can get that, that's going to take a lot of stress out of your day, because not only do you know your numbers, but you also know how heavy you should be going, how soon you should be doing it. And that's going to allow you to just have that edge where everything's timed, you're in a rhythm, you're appropriately rested, you're not rushing, and you're not falling behind either. All right, so wrapping things up, if you're prepping for your first powerlifting meet, the simplest way to make sure that you get the highest total on top of having a solid training plan to begin with in order to showcase that strength is to have a game plan, just like you do for your training, with your attempts. And a really easy way to do that is to use the powerlifting attempt selection tool, that PR booster that we've talked about. You can get a free copy. It's a Google Sheet down in the video description below. And the goal here should be to strategically pace your attempts as well as your warm-ups to bring your best performance to the platform and showcase really all the work you've been putting in under the bar in the gym in the months, weeks, or even years leading up to things. So if you're thinking about getting ready for your first meet, I've left a link down below, check it out. And if you're looking for more frequent content than what you might see on this channel on how to get ready for your first powerlifting meet, increase your total by up to 200 pounds in 4 months with less than 5 hours a week in the gym, because you're a busy guy, you can follow me on Instagram. And if you're looking for direct help with how to do that outside of just some of the free content that I put out on my socials, you can DM me the word coaching. I'll personally respond to you. There's no chat bots or anything. And we can talk a little bit about how I might be able to help you with that, or even if I just got some other resources that I think you'd really benefit from. Thanks as always, and we'll see you on the next video.